Hello, all, and welcome to Thursday Night Live. I am Adam Jacobs with H New York, and it's a pleasure to be here. We have ostensibly an incendiary topic tonight, and I'd like to give the following background about it. I don't think it's any secret that the Jewish people have been through a lot in the last few thousand years. And with all the travails and the pogroms and the Holocaust and the expulsions, it's certainly easy to believe that maybe we don't have any real friends in this world. And I'm sure at times it seemed that way. Going way back, however, we see that that's simply not the case. From ancient times, we always had true supporters and friends. For example, there was a Phoenician king named Hiram, who is mentioned in the Book of Kings, in the Book of Samuel, and he was David's friend, and they had actual correspondence and business dealings. And then David's son Solomon also had connection with him, and they ended up partnering to build the first temple. There was a Jebusite king named Arnon, who actually stored the Ark of the Covenant in his granary, which would eventually become the site of the Holy of Holies in the first temple. So you had a partnership with this Jebusite, Canaanite, non-Jewish king and King David. We know that there's a famous story of Queen Sheba, the Queen of Sheba, coming and visiting Solomon and having a connection with him and being amazed by his wisdom. And then there's the concept that the Talmudic sages, many of whom had relationships with Roman leaders at the time. They exchanged ideas, they respected each other, they were friends, leading perhaps the Jewish sages to write in the Talmud the concept of yesh hachma begoyim, that there is wisdom amongst the nations. We have a respect for their wisdom and for their partnership, obviously. In more recent times, you can point to someone like Oskar Schindler and what he did. Less known, but more successful even, was a man named Shiuni Sugihara, who was a Japanese diplomat who saved 6,000 Jewish lives, plus the very many clergy during the Holocaust, Catholic clergy who hid and saved Jewish children especially. They saved thousands of Jews that way. Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel, has a special award, which is called the Righteous Amongst the Gentiles. Non-Jews who made significant contributions to the well-being, saving Jewish lives. And I think that that is a beautiful award. And I'm sort of thinking at this point that maybe we need one of those for PR, for people who are willing to stand up nowadays and to defend the Jewish people against our current travails. And we are lucky to have one of these people with us tonight, and I would like to introduce her straight away. Her name is Virag Gulyas. Come on over, Virag.
Hi Adam. Hi, everybody.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and especially since it's the middle of the night in your native Hungary. I'm sure you are somewhat tired, and we really appreciate you going out of your way once again to do something for us. And I appreciate it personally, and we appreciate it organizationally.
Thank you.
Okay, so I hope you picked up on the drift of what I was communicating just then.
Yes.
And let me ask you, I know some of it, but let me ask you a bit about your bio. Okay. Who are you? How did you get here? And what brought you to be engaged in this kind of work?
Sure. If you allow me, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. And, it's not a secret that we know each other. So you know a little bit more about me. While I was listening to your intro and, talking about the righteous among the Gentiles, I was thinking, why do we even need to justify that you are going to talk with a Gentile? Why cannot we just say that maybe she is a person who is of interest or who wants to, is a good human being?
Yes.
So for me, it was like the more I am in this niche for the last 6, 7 years, and I'm going to answer your question also. But as you were, going into the intro, I was like, why is that such pressure on me? Like, why do I need to kind of like, uphold to a certain standards to be able to come on a show with you without being judged or without age being judged? So that's that. We can talk about that. But to answer your question, I am from Hungary originally. I spend most of my times in New York, actually. Now, because of COVID, I'm here with my parents. My background is relatively diverse. I was a professional ballet dancer, so I lived in Switzerland for a couple of years. And then I shifted gears, shifted careers, and I went to a college where I studied international relations and politics. Then I was a diplomat representing Hungary at the European Union. And then again, I kind of like had these weird dreams and wanting to try myself in New York. So I went there for the first time. I studied all the journalism courses I attended all the journalist courses that were possible for my budget. And then I applied for a master program in Jewish studies at Touro College in Manhattan. And this is also the time when you and I met.
Yeah.
By this time, I was working, I have an agency. And somehow, when I got involved in the whole Jewish niche, I learned about BDS, I learned about all the, hate towards Jewish nonprofits. And I felt like, okay, if they boycott you, I'm going to work with you. And I was very, very intrigued by the whole industry of such. And one of the reasons I went to the university was because I felt that I have the enthusiasm, I have, the curiosity. But if I really want to help a Jewish nonprofits, religious or not, I need to understand more about the Jewish history. So I went to the university, graduated last January.
Mazel tov.
Toda rava. Yes. So that's in a nutshell.
Okay. And as you were learning Jewish history, something must have struck you within it that compelled you to want to defend it, defend us, speak out. What did something happen that compelled that?
So that was way, way before that. That started in 2012-ish. And let's be honest, and whoever is watching, if you see the comments that we received for this event, that was not really welcoming. I felt like I'm going into Gaza City. Sorry, but like really, I felt like I'm entering to an enemy territory, and I'm kind of used to the hate because it's not easy to speak up for the Jewish people. And this is something a Holocaust survivor told me. She said, it's not easy to be a Jew, but it's also not easy or even more difficult to stand up for the Jews because you get even more attack from all the angles. And there are a lot of cultural differences. So when Aish put out the advertisement saying, I'm a Christian person, and then you had something like a tagline that more pro-Israel or more pro-Jewish than many Jewish people.
Yeah.
And somehow it
was triggering.
Yes, it was triggering. And in a way, I might understand. On the other hand, not really. Because let's be honest, I'm never talking about how to break your bread on Shabbat, right? So that would be intimidating or offensive, from me to say I never do that. I'm never gonna do that. I am not Jewish. I'm not a Torah expert, so I'm never gonna do that. But there is a big aspect here, and that is Zionism. And I am a proud Zionist, and that is regardless of one's faith and one's background. And the fact that my roots are from Christianity, that should not be suspicious. And here is a cultural thing here. When I moved to America, that's the first time I was like facing this hate or suspiciousness towards me when I said, I'm a Christian who supports Israel. And then they came with these labels like Messianic, evangelical. And I think you even remember I told you, I was like, I don't even know what this means. I needed to Google. Where I'm coming from, it's not really a mainstream thing. So I dropped from my bio Christian because I am not a churchgoer person. I left church for various reasons when I was 15. I made a pact with God. We are still very in a good relationship. We make
Good.
conversations, outside of the church. So yeah.
Okay, so you've hidden your Christian identity, or you don't identify that way exactly? Because I think part of some of the anger that seemed to be directed towards the event and towards you stems from the belief that Christians aren't really pro-Jewish or pro-Israel. They're just playing a theological game. And when we get all the Jews corralled into the right place, there's going to be this rapture, and Jesus will come, and the world will end in the way that they want.
You lost me halfway through. So that's the thing. Nobody's ever going to have a Jesus debate with me, because I left church for a reason. I am not comfortable with dogmas. Let it be Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever. I believe in an honest conversation with God. So I'm definitely spiritual, and I love the Jewish spirituality. Like, I think you also know that I fast on Yom Kippur. I understand the meaning why we fast. I personally, and again, I know that it's more of an Orthodox audience, I don't believe that, God is going to punish you if you eat a piece of bread. But I understand the higher level of why Yom Kippur exists. And I absolutely respect and value that. Whether I hide my Christianity, look, again, even in Christianity, I am not a Bible expert. I dropped Bible classes, even though it was taught by my grandfather. So it's a lot of dichotomy. But I believe in God, but I'm not going to fight over Jesus and the nuances of the two religions, because I believe that the core essence of both is that we believe in a God, and we are striving to be always a better person than we were yesterday. And, the commandments of like how to be a good person is not so far from each other. So
Sure.
For me, whether Jesus was killed by a Jews, I'm sorry to say, but these are the things that it's not something that I am having in my mind on a daily basis. I'm much more versed and interested and curious about Zionism. So if you want to talk about, that, then I can, go on a whole spiel with that. But that's what people mix. I'm not here to convert you. And I also don't want to be converted, because that's also happening many times. That, if you're so much into the Jewish culture, why don't you just convert? The two are going parallel. Judaism, Zionism. I can be a supporter without wanting to have an agenda, so to say.
So our producer, yes, he's going to put up a question, which is, that was quite a prose to start out the show. I'm personally named after my Jewish great-grandfather, who helped bring his Jewish friends over from Europe in the 1930s by committing immigration fraud in Canada. The question I have is, in what sense can we truly draw this parallel? People who stand up for Jews today are hardly faced with the same risk. The righteous among the nations who helped shelter Jews did so at the risk of being sent to the camps. Isn't it really trivializing the Holocaust? Okay, you want to take that, or should I take a stab at it?
Let's discuss it together. I think it's an absolutely legit question, and by no means we can compare the two eras. But I do get death threats from day one. The fact that I vocalize my support to Israel and the Jewish people at large, it doesn't come without a cost. So when people say why there are not more non-Jewish people standing up with such a vehemency or such a confidence, it has a reason. It is not a glamorous business to be at. Just see that this event, had all these hateful comments, and I can grow a thick face and skin. I'm still a human being with my personal issues, with my feelings, with my daily stress. So when I read these comments, I also need to deal with them and cope with them. So to also answer, like many times, even retrospect, when we say that there were non-Jewish people who helped the Jews during the Holocaust, do you know how many times I get the response, yeah, but they were paid for that? And then I'm like, is it that bad? Like they saved a Jewish person by
Right.
risking their lives. The
Yeah.
fact that they got money for that, and this is an example I used in my yesterday's lecture, today we do not even move a pen without reward, without money, without a stipend, without, becoming famous. So the moral compass is somehow lost in generations. So I understand the question. I think definitely I have an easier job so far, but in today's ideologically diverse and very, right, left, very polarized world, it is definitely not easy to stand up for Israel, especially not with conservative values,
Yes. Yes. I think that was very well said. And I would just add to it that in my intro, I was not looking to make a direct comparison between those people who put their lives at risk specifically and knew what they were getting into, and PR defense. Although I didn't realize that you had gotten death threats, and I think that does change the dynamic immediately, and is a really important part of the answer. So yeah, so being a Jew comes with risks, and defending Jews comes with risks, and as such, at least this Jew appreciates very intently, the what you're doing for us, and I think that going on your Facebook page, you certainly see you have a lot of fans there who are cheering you on, and I'm sure you also get a lot of vitriol over there as well, but there's a lot of people who seem to be in your camp.
Indeed, and you know what, I'm like, why I absolutely appreciate your kindness and your support and your words. It also should not be something, to put on a pedestal that I do what I do. Because for me, it's kind of like common sense. I stand up for my country with the same confidence as I stand up for Israel. Because, again, I know the history of Zionism. So I have a whole master's degree, and that all I read for the last 2-3 years were, books on Zionism and Jewish studies. So I know that most people would approach, perhaps in your audience, that Zionism comes from religion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But I always say, in this heated environment, and towards my generation and the generation after me, when you guys start talking about 3,000 years ago, God promised us the land, you lose half the people there. People don't even know what happened in the time of the Second World War. They cannot name today one concentration camp. Some of the people in America don't even know who Hitler was or why was he a bad guy. So I think when we stand up for example, Israel and the legitimate existence of Israel, I approach it more from the civil rights movement. And that has a lot to do with my country's history, starting from the revolution, in 1848 and then 1956. So all the parallelism that was actually also influencing Zionist thinkers back then in the 19th century. They saw all these revolutions going through, the big European cities for emancipation and for minority rights and things. And that's how I approach. So if I have the right for my own country with its sovereignty, then the Jewish people have the same right. So standing up for this should not be something super amazing thing. It should be common sense for everyone. And I do say that as long as you ask, as long as you attack Israel's legitimacy, I'm sorry, but I'm very harsh. You are an anti-Semitic person. Because then you are okay to let the Jews just, wander around and being attacked and stabbed. So this is...
Right. So I have a question. We're going to get to that more specifically. We have another question. Very important points. Thanks for starting off this conversation like this, Virag. The Jewish community needs to realize we have sincere, authentic, and good-hearted non-Jewish allies, and we need to welcome them fully. Of course, some people will always be inauthentic, but those voices will always expose themselves eventually as such.
Thank you.
I agree. Thank you for that. Okay. I wanted to ask you, you've been doing this for what, 5 years, 6 years?
6, 7 already, yeah.
What's the most rewarding experience that you've had since you started doing this?
I'm always like checking on impact. So the whole thing is this whole being a speaker or being part of the so-called Hasbara business. it is not something I was intentionally drawn into. I personally do not appreciate the Hasbara concept, because with that you already elevate Israel to a double standard situation. Like,
can you explain what it is?
Yeah, so Hasbara is basically to explain, Israel from a PR perspective, to make people like Israel. That's pretty much in detail. And the Israeli government has, several guidebooks and trainings on how to talk about Israel. And I see the added value in that. But every country has their own PR and branding and marketing. And what I always say is that when I am a Hungarian in the US, whoever is talking with me, I represent Hungary, because I'm still a Hungarian. So the same goes for Israel. Instead of justifying the existence of Israel and proving that Israel is amazing and, the tomatoes and the startups, no, when you are an Israeli and you go abroad, be a good person. And then, you solve Israel's PR. And I know that it sounds like, minimizing the situation and the tension around Israel. But also my journey, we didn't touch upon that, but I was not always on this side, so to say. I pretty much, and now I'm playing on the advantage of the enemies, so to say, that I was very much at the verge of being anti-Semitic. And this is something that I own. And there is a big, big difference between being anti-Semitic person by a conscious choice or being anti-Semitic by ignorance and not knowing better. So I fell in the second category. I didn't know better. I was still born I was born in 85. So it was still communism in Hungary. How much information you could really gather about Jews and non-Jews? We didn't have social media growing up. All I had was, that my ballet school was located in the Jewish district. So my only visual was the Orthodox Jewry in Hungary. And apart from that, it was not known who was Jew and who was not. So I was very well equipped with Jewish stereotypes and Jewish jokes. I knew them very much by heart. So when my journey started, it was 2012, and it started with an Israeli boy who took me to Israel and who became, after a long-term relationship, which since ended, and I'm still here doing what I'm doing. So he was the first drop of domino. And that is why I believe that people can change. Because I was so curious after my first time in Israel that I went back like 18 times. And it was first a very emotional connection to Israel and how the Jewish people welcomed me for Shabbat dinners and opened their homes to me. And then I wanted to go deeper. And since I studied politics and international relations, I started to dig deeper. And then I saw all the double standards against Israel. And I was like, something is really fishy here. Like, at the EU and then the UN, but I had the chance to work for 2 years. And then the rest is history, really. But it's been 7 years.
So let's talk for a minute about our Facebook friends who expressed themselves to us today and the last couple of days. Some people said that we phrased the marketing poorly, and that we caused people to feel judged, which of course is literally the last thing that this organization wants to do to anybody, literally the last thing. Or we were accused several times of putting on an anti-Semitic event tonight, which is wild, considering your stance being completely philo-Semitic, and I'd like to think that mine is too. This is a pro-Jewish conversation. So I'd like to ask you why was it so triggering for, it seems to me there was Jews who were triggered, who felt judged by the fact that we suggested that you may know more about Judaism than some Jews. That was very bothersome to people, one. And two, there seemed to be a decent amount of non-Jews who just wanted to heap vitriol on Israel itself. What's that about?
So I think the answer is manifold. And first of all, we know how, or maybe not, but I work in social media and digital media and PR. So I know how Facebook is operating. The moment you put out something and perhaps, you even market it with a little budget. But regardless of that, the first person who comments draws in the next. So if anyone wants to watch a shocking but actually almost fully true documentary on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, it really talks about it, how actually these movements, like the BLM and all these movements, are created on social media. And it is thanks to the algorithm. The moment you like and comment on something, all the similarly interested and similar-minded people will come to the same page. So something similar happened here, because I had several events during the last couple of years, and I got heat and cold all the time. But this was the first time when there was not one positive comment. So when there is not one positive, welcoming comment, that's always raising a flag. On the other hand, yes, it was triggering, I think, in terms that you also wrote Christian, and then kind of like positioning me that I might know more about Jewish history than many Jews.
Is that possibly true?
Look, actually, yes, it might be true, and it's proven many times. And this is not something that.
But why is that such a shocking possibility?
Yeah. So, I welcome everyone to study. Like, I actually invested time, money, sacrificed relationships, and I'm not victimizing myself here. It was my choice. But I knew where my education is limited on Jewish history. So I went for a whole full-fledged master program.
I remember.
I'm like, I don't know everything, but I'm every day with an open mind, open another book or open the news, and I read. So just because I am not Jewish, my educational knowledge should not be questioned. Because again, let me repeat that I'm not talking about how to break your Shabbat bread. So then, stop me and say, okay, you are going too far. But when I'm talking about something factual. And another thing, what shocked me a little bit is that this event was labeled anti-Semitic. Now that was for me a little bit like, from which angle, like what? So where are these people when, for example, Rashida Tlaib is talking or speaking at an anti-Semitic panel with Mark Lemon and the Jewish Peter Beinart? All three of them are bashing Israel and the Jewish people and have proven track of anti-Semitic tweets and sentences and interviews. So you can dislike me, you can dislike my personality, my accent, whatever you want. But as long as I prove to be a decent human being, and you cannot prove that I have ever had an anti-Semitic comment, then perhaps listen to me first before you judge. So don't judge the book by the cover. And that's pretty much the answer. And there is another big topic we can open here, is something that I call, and I wrote to one of the commenters, is goy shaming.
Right. So explain what that is.
So I don't even know if this really exists as a term. That's how I phrased it. It's kind of like when I am being put down in a discussion just because I'm not Jewish.
Right.
Or when I tell you that, okay, this is offensive towards me as a non-Jew, that is goy shaming. And there are Facebook groups where Jewish people share things from people like myself that, oh, look at this guy is talking again. Oh, look what this guy is doing.
Yeah, that seems pretty bigoted, wouldn't you say? Andrea says, with all the Jew hatred, why are you so quick to condemn this woman? Listen to what she has to say. Exactly.
Thank you.
Listen to what she has to say. It seems so basic. But yeah, so we were accused organizationally of putting on someone who was going to be doing goy-splaining.
Yes.
And you and I have discussed this in the past, actually, on video, that the use of the word goy is a negative epithet. Like it's an attack word when used in the wrong way. It does just mean nation. In theory, by itself, it means nothing. But of course, there's describing someone as a Jew, or someone as a Jew, dirty Jew.
Right.
So to me, that just writing goy-splaining is a bigoted and hateful thing to write, and seems to rob you of any right to say anything on this topic, because the Jews are the final and only arbiters of all things Jewish, which I guess which is an approach, and I could see where maybe it would be annoying to having people explain what your own stuff means. But in the case where someone comes out as a friend, and is really standing up and trying to help, I mean, give her the benefit of the doubt, and don't shut her down that way. It just seems immoral, frankly.
Adam, I think it goes even further, if you allow me to interrupt here, is if we ever want to change our future, or even present, but the future, it has to be a two-way street respect and a two-way street curiosity. Me, the non-Jew, you, the Jew. It is very easy to fall into the trap because of the collective memory of traumas and the collective memory of the Shoah, that from now on, every non-Jew needs to respect me, and somehow, maybe not the best concept that I use, but very visual, tiptoe on an eggshell around me because I am Jewish and I already suffered so much. This sentence should not come across as offensive, but it is often labeled like, oh, you don't know what we went through. Sure, I will never know. But it does not mean that you can just disrespect me or talk to me for someone who is below you just because I was born as a non-Jew. So I am trying my best to have an open mind. And as I said, my transition did not happen overnight. I really had to look into the mirror and ask myself the hard questions. Why did I stereotype the Jews? Based on what experience? Were they mine or were they taught to me? So these are hard questions, but I would like to ask the other side to come with the same approach, that just because a non-Jew is there, let's not trash and bash her, especially without listening. And another thing, what I'm trying to aim for is that really is everything that is said and labeled as anti-Semitic, really hateful anti-Semitism? And I tell you what I mean. So many times Jewish journalists are writing about, the blood libel and another blood libel against the Jews. Most people, unless you have a significant knowledge about the Jewish history, you would not know what blood libel against the Jews mean.
Yes.
That you poison the water in the wells in the medieval ages. I know that because of my studies, but a normal, non-Jew on the street will not understand. So perhaps sometimes, and I'm not justifying anti-Semitism, but perhaps sometimes non-Jews say things out of ignorance.
Right.
So what if one day we would turn to the neighbor who is seemingly anti-Semitic and ask, do you know that actually this is an anti-Semitic statement? And perhaps that person is going to be like, oh, really? Why? I didn't think about that. And the same way, if I as a non-Jew tell you that, okay, this is a little offensive language, for example, when I say I'm Hungarian, I often get, the comment that, oh, you guys are all anti-Semitic people, it's in their DNA, or it's in your DNA. And I'm like, really?
So it's a little bit broad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think that seems very obvious to me. I think we're on the same page, but maybe you've just said it, but I had written it down. I wanted to ask, do you have a core message for the Almost Jewish movement, let's call it? Is there some specific thing that you'd like to convey to the Jewish people? Like there's something that you want them to know that you could boil down?
I think it's continuously changing. When I started that Facebook page, when was it, 4 years ago? It was just my creative outlet. I needed to deal with my own soul searching. So I started to write, blogs and wrote to the Times of Israel. And then one article there went viral. And that's when people started to connect with me. And it was a whole surprise for me. So in the beginning, I was very much talking about, how I changed. Then it expanded to a lot of current Israeli foreign affairs and politics. Then it went even broader after my first Hungarian TV interview on this topic, that somehow I was put in this position that I need to represent Hungary in this whole discussion. So it's a continuously altering platform in that way. I really try to write only when I have something to say. I'm trying to avoid becoming just an echo chamber and repeating the same thing. And it's a tricky business because I know exactly how social media works, and I know what kind of articles should I put up every day for me to have 20,000 followers in a month's time. But I made this decision very early that I'm not going for these vanity metrics. I want to have an honest conversation. And I think what I really like on my page, that apart from like 2 occasions during the last 4 years, I never had to block anyone. And even if they are or liberal or conservative Jews or Polish or Ukrainian or American, we almost always found the way to have a human and normal, dignified conversation. And this is something that I love. And for me, that's impact number 1. In terms of like what I want to achieve with this, again, is changing. For me nowadays, this self disrespect towards each other is getting more and more on the top of the priority. This was not among my priorities a couple of years ago. It was all about me and my journey. And now that I know where I stand, it's expanding towards a larger cause. I definitely love reading when people say, I never wanted to go to Hungary because of what happened during the Shoah, but because of your post, now I am ready to go. Or when a non-Jewish person says, I always thought Israel was a war zone. Because of your post, I understand more and I'm happy to go. And finally, I went to Israel. So for me, these are amazing feedbacks.
Yes. And critically important, one by one, and there's seems like we have a few people on the Facebook page who still need to be won over. And I hope that they tuned in, and I hope that they got an actual real view of who you are and what you do. But I do have a couple more questions.
Go for it. I will try to be shorter.
You don't have to be short. No, it's fine. We're good. We're good. If you could change one thing about the Jewish world, what would it be?
Yeah. Now you are just calling for trouble.
No, I'm interested in your perspective because, it's not common. And I think you have a very good perspective. I'd love to hear what it is.
I think the first and foremost that I would like to not necessarily change, but getting better at is there are so many organizations out there and so many influencers out there in this niche who want good. But at the end of the day, it becomes such an ego game. It becomes a race to the funds, which comes from similar sources. And I feel that this kind of maybe unconscious, maybe conscious, I don't know, a competition between organizations is hindering the larger cause, And I always compare. This is why, for example, BDS is so much stronger when it comes to PR and branding, because in as much as they have their own personality under their umbrellas and organizations, when it comes to the common enemy, and that is, Israel, then they go hand in hand. Whenever there is a march out there, for example, in New York, let's stand up for Jewish rights, or like how, for example, Cuomo and the mayor, kind of singled out the Jewish community in Brooklyn. And we had a rally, and it was so hard to gather people. And the first question was, which organization is doing? Based on that, I decide if I'm going or not. Anti-Semitism and standing up for yourself and for Israel should not be a partisan issue. And so for me, I think throughout my work, with all my clients being in this niche, this is what I see, this ego game and competition that's definitely not helping the larger cause. And yeah, there are 2 more, but this is the most important.
So more unity, basically, and more common purpose and working together.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, we need that. Another question that this is a question. This is an ancient question in some ways, but updated to the present day, and based again on a bunch of the comments that I saw today, which I would describe as hateful. Why would you say there's such antipathy for the state of Israel? What have they done? Are they so much worse than any other country in the world that they deserve to be rebuked time and again at the UN, when other countries like Iran, for instance, received no rebuke. How do you explain that from your perspective? How do you account for it?
It would take up another hour actually to go into details. So I'm gonna give the frame of my answer, and that is, the truth is that the anti-Semitism today is sugar-coated in this anti-Israelism and anti-Zionism, starting from labeling Zionism as racism, which was very much on the account of the UN and the accredited NGOs at the UN, which were all Arab-led back then. It was 2001 and the Durban conference when this happened. Since then, it is a balagan, it is a nightmare. And that is why I say, use Natan Sharansky's 3D test. If your statement, you can criticize Israel, such as any other government, Israel can be criticized and should be for the better, to make
it as a friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the moment you use delegitimization, double standards, or demonization against Israel or the Jewish people, unfortunately, let me break the news, you are an anti-Semitic person. So at the UN, for example, what you mentioned, it cannot be that Syria, North Korea, Iran, and all these countries with very serious human rights violations are dictating the condemnations against Israel. So that's insanity, but it is a bigger problem. It is not solely an Israel-Jewish problem. It is a whole ideological shift that takes over the world now. And this is why I think what we need to understand, that what might start with the Jewish people are not going to end with the Jewish people. So, there is this, there is the terrorist attack that happened in Vienna a couple of weeks ago. It was quickly labeled as an anti-Semitic attack. But was it really? What was the original target?
No.
The Christmas markets. The only reason they eventually went after that neighborhood, because Austria introduced the lockdown the next day. So they knew that they have harder time to have a target on the street. But the original target was the Christmas market. And we have seen that throughout the last couple of years, what's going on in Germany or in France. They attack Jews and they attack Christians at the same time, and then under the same notion. The same in America. Churches, synagogues, schools, none of them are safe a haven at the moment.
Yes, sadly. So therefore, it sounds to me like you're saying that folks who claim that they're not anti-Semitic, they're just anti-Israel, are in fact actually anti-Semitic.
Yes, they just pretend it very nicely. But you asked actually why, and I'm sorry, after all, it's my 3 a.m., so sometimes I lose the track of thoughts. But Israel became so strong that it's again a tendency to put Israel on a different standard. It's oftentimes, even among pro-Israel activists, it's said that just because Israel is strong, Israel is responsible for the situation vis-a-vis Palestinians. And I have a very good example for that I tell every time. So if someone heard, I'm sorry. But if you get $20 million and you spend it on hospitals and research and development and cancer cures, and the other party gets the same amount and decides to dig tunnels from that money and shoot rockets over Israel, am I really responsible for my strengths and good decisions? So I don't like that approach at all. There is a huge problem, and the Palestinian population at large is a victim, but not of the Israeli government per se, but the leadership, unfortunately, that is pretty much a terrorist organization on both ends of the spectrum. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that just to add a little onto that, and then maybe we'll start to wrap things up here. But I did see something online that a guy was trying to point out that he says the criticism of Great Britain is not anti-British, but like you never hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there no parallel to this question? Like, well, you can be anti-Israel without being like, that doesn't exist as far as I know in any other culture, right? That consideration. And he goes on to say that Israel is just simply different in this way. He says, not because it has some divine mandate that puts it above criticism, but it is not like every other country because uniquely it is faced with staticide, that it's going to die as a state.
Mhm.
Israel's enemies do not want to change its policies. They want it to not have policies. They want it to not exist. And I think that that's part of the defensiveness when people think they're leveling legitimate criticism at Israel. It doesn't feel like it's legitimate. It doesn't feel like it's coming with a desire to improve any particular policy of the state. It feels more like this is a step on the road to it not existing and the Jewish people being expelled once again from their homeland. And I think that that's why a lot of us experience it as something scary and something bigoted.
Mm-hmm. I think actually you made me think, and I'm thankful for that, because I think this is where the problem with Hasbara comes in. Hasbara was the first one trying to coin the term pro-Israelism, pro-Israel movement. The moment you say pro, you are against something. And this is the difference. I do need to stand up for Hungary. There is a lot of Hungarian hatred out there. If you Google, there is a terminology, actually, Hungary hatred. We have a very heavy history with our neighbors also, But I never say I am pro-Hungarian. Why not? Because the legitimate existence of my country is not being questioned. In Israel case, no matter how many times, like Israel is a created state. So the moment we say I'm pro-Israel, we are still questioning whether that can be taken away. Mm-hmm. And this is the difference. That is why you cannot be pro-UK, pro-Hungary, and pro-Poland, because there's no question about the country beneath that. But in Israel's case, and I think that's a problem that we perhaps need to change, We need to get stronger. The Israeli PR and Hungary is very much alike on that. They're always very defensive. And we just react once there is already, like rockets flying. So once I actually had, when I still worked at the UN, I had a UN badge. And then I came out of the UN and I led a protest when there were so many rockets flying over Israel. And at the UN, we are condemning Israel for bad behavior and whatnot. So I made, like a big flyer or something. And I wrote, if anyone would flew a rocket towards Hungary, I would, shoot back. So Israel has all the right to protect themselves. So yeah, I was harsh on that, but I really believe in that. Self-defense, is granted. Anyway.
Last question, and then I think there's a few comments that we're going to put up. Is what's one practical thing? I'm sure you have inspired people with what you've said tonight, and in general with what you do. What's one way somebody could get involved if they also wanted to stand up and actively defend Israel and or the Jewish people?
I think we all have a role, and sometimes not everybody has the character to go online and talk, and you don't need to. So every person has its own role making for us a better future. I really believe in that. So my boyfriend always asks me, why are you even doing this, what you're doing? You are like a masochistic person getting up at 2 a.m. and getting all the hate, and I really sometimes trying to stop it. And then I'm okay to be quiet for 3 days. And then I just I have this urge. But not everybody needs to do the same. And also, let's not kid ourselves. Anything that is like an online activism is a fake activism in a way, So this is why I'm very strong on going on the street. And also, when you attend the rally, talk to the people on the street. It is really driving me nuts when people are going on the street, but we are just there with the Israeli flag and nothing happens. Why don't we engage with the people on the street, asking them, do you know why we are here? Do you want to learn more about the situation, what we are protesting against or something? So engage, and never underestimate your role. And, being a decent human being is already going to help a lot for our future. So that's
okay. I think we've disproved some of the comments online. So Virag, we both agree we love Jewish people.
Yes,
We love non-Jewish people.
we do.
We want everyone to be happy and successful and good. Anything beyond that?
No, not really. And I really don't want to convert anyone. So that is always so shocking for me. I'm like, no, thank you. I really thank you for the opportunity. And look, I'm not sure we would change everybody's mind with this conversation. Some people just purely want to hate. Go for it. If you feel better by that, good for it. But I would so much more want these people to put their energy into something more useful, because hating me is definitely not going to make the world better. So even if you disagree with me, find your niche, find your passion, find the cause that you can go with, with a broad shoulder and wake up at 3 a.m. and talk about it, so.
Well said. Okay, Mr. Producer, let's see. This woman should be celebrated by every viewer. Why has this discussion taken the detour that it has? I don't know. I thought it was good. I agree, David. She speaks wonderfully, and am learning and enjoying all this. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
It's true. Virag is a modern day Ruth, and Israel is her Bethlehem.
Thank you. I really appreciate. I'm so looking forward to, perhaps you guys want to follow the page. And I don't like the word follow, because don't follow me. Question everything I'm saying. I want to trigger people to think, and let's have a conversation. So even if you disagree with me, I'm really, as long as we are respectful, I'm always up for it. And we always learn from each other. So I definitely always learn from Rabbi Adam Jacobs. So whenever we meet.
It's mutual. And anyway, thank you for getting up in the middle of the night to do this recording. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope we'll have many other opportunities, and that you will continue to do the bang up job that you are doing, which many, many, many of us appreciate very sincerely.
Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, and we will be back next week at this time with Thursday Night Live. It's been a pleasure being here. Have a great night.
Laila Tov, thank you.